Roll call.
Hold on.
Oh, okay.
Let me sit. Take a minute. It's the right page. Swanberg.
Here.
Lund.
Here.
Kushner.
Here.
Jacobs.
Here. Adoption of the agenda.
Brooks.
Yes.
Swanberg.
Yes.
Lund.
Yes.
Kushner.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes. Okay, back up in minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, right, I forgot to, sorry about that. So, approval of the minutes, move to approve.
Brooks.
Yes.
Swanberg.
Yes.
Lund.
Yes.
Kushner.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes. All right, presentation, proclamation for Big Brothers Big Sisters. I don't see anybody there, so I'll just read it from up here. Okay. So, proclamation Big Brothers Big Sisters. Whereas Big Brothers Big Sisters of Johnson County, Missouri enables life-changing mentoring relationships to ignite the power and promise of youth in our community. And whereas investing in young people's futures pay off with a social return on investment of $18 to $1 through improved economics, health, and social outcomes for young people with mentors. And whereas by changing the course of young lives, we shape our community, social, and economic futures. And whereas Big Brothers Big Sisters of Johnson County currently supports 25 matches by partnering with parents, guardians, volunteers, and others in the community to help youth achieve higher aspirations, greater confidence, and better relationships, avoidance of risky behavior, and educational success. And whereas the agency's goal is to recruit more volunteers based on the needs of young people in our community. Now, therefore, I, Brian Jacobs, Mayor of the City of Warrensburg, Missouri, along with other members of the Warrensburg City Council, do hereby proclaim September 2020 as Big Brothers Big Sisters Month. I encourage everyone to volunteer or donate by visiting www.bbbsjoco.org and learn about how you can get involved in igniting the potential of youth in our community. All right. On to public hearings. Public hearing for general budget comments. You know, anybody sign up, Chief?
So while he's checking that, budget is on the agenda for second reading and a vote by the council tonight. So this is the last opportunity for public input of any changes for the fiscal year 2020, 2021.
No one signed up?
No.
All right. So I guess we'll just close that one.
We need to check the Zoom.
No one has raised their hand.
Okay. All right, we'll close that public hearing. Move to a public hearing on ordinance amending side ordinance relating to visual art. Public hearing on ordinance amending chapter 27503B of the Code of the City Ordinance in the City of Warrensburg, Missouri regarding signs not requiring permits. That's Barbara, assuming she's on Zoom.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. This is an ordinance that will affect several in the community who have participated in the past through the Arts Commission or possibly through Main Street in adding visual art to our community through the use of murals. Main Street has a current project underway, and it brought about a discussion with Jill and staff regarding how the city treats murals. In the past, we have had a mixed approach. Sometimes we have required them to get sign permits, and other times groups have not been required to get sign permits. It does communicate a message and it does qualify as a sign in that way, and that's why it's been treated as such in some instances. At this point, staff would like to treat them all equally and not require sign permits for them. They do provide a public benefit in improving the aesthetics and the community character. As well, it can be challenging for them to meet the sign requirements for wall signs, namely that they not be more than 30% of the size of the wall to which they're attached. Typically, if you think of our murals downtown, the Pirtle Springs mural or the new one that was installed on the building across from the library there by North Street, they are much larger than 30% of that wall. That's part of the character that they provide. So staff has proposed the attached ordinance, and it adds a subpoint 8 to section 27-503. The ordinance actually does include all of the text of that language, but only subpoint 8 is new language. All of the rest of that is provided just to make sure that it gets codified correctly if approved by council. We have not received, well, the only public comment we had was at the Planning and Zoning Commission last week from Jill Purvis, the director of Main Street, and she was in favor of the proposed item as well. Staff would be happy to answer any questions.
So what about, so for instance, there's that famous painting where a guy redid Campbell's soup cans, like in a box pattern with different colors. You could argue that's art on a mural, or you can also argue that's advertising for Campbell's soup. So,
correct. So through the definition, if it is related to commercial activity or promotes a specific business, we would treat it as a sign.
If it has any commercial message, it falls within the current sign ordinance. This is just.
right, but I guess this. So my wife used to work in the gallery, and what she considered art, I strongly and vehemently disagreed with.
Well, and right now, whenever we look at sign ordinance or sign permits and stuff, it has nothing to do with the message. Staff is merely only able to look at the size and the location of it, what it says. We don't authorize that. We have nothing to do with it. It's just the size and location and what it's affixed to, that kind of stuff. So this would be similar in fashion to that. It basically, the only stipulation is no commercial message. It could be the whole wall now, or before it could only be 30%.
So I'm okay with even a commercial mural, like a town that my grandparents were in when I was growing up, had a giant Coca-Cola mural outside all the little buildings. Been there for God knows how long. But I'm fine with the idea of allowing someone to use even a whole wall. But that doesn't bother me at all. I guess where I become the area that I have the reluctance is what makes this art sacrosanct and worthy of ignoring, being treated differently than the commercial thing, or vice versa. Why can't the commercial sign be an entire wall? I mean, graphic design is design.
This would open up, which is what you want, but only on visual art. And then if we wanted to go further, I mean, we could talk about that at a later time and discuss going, allowing a broader scope for businesses. But this is just solely for those murals and stuff we have downtown to make it to where they don't have to go through a sign process.
So what does the process currently look like when someone wants to do a mural?
Well, they're supposed to go through and submit, but they haven't all done that, and so that's why they're wanting to have continuity to where everybody does it the same. And so they're saying, let's just remove the barriers.
But shouldn't they still submit for the city to say, okay, I guess what I want to make sure is that they need to submit something prior to putting up their art, so that the city can say, okay, we agree, because what you're essentially saying is the city's now going to start making value judgments on what is and is not art. Within this, is it a commercial message, or is the guy just making a beautiful picture of a Mustang?
I think that depends on whether or not it's on the side of a car dealership.
That's right, yeah, just get ready to go there, exactly.
But you watch movies, you can argue movies are art, but these companies pay millions of dollars to make sure that their car is the only car in the Transformers movie. I forget which.
If they are the ones paying for that project, I think it could potentially be taken that way. But if it's a community effort that with no affiliation to that brand, I don't, and it's.
But wouldn't we need to verify that prior to them painting or putting up the mural?
I'll let Barbara answer that, but there is still an application process. What we're saying is this code change
No.
will treat a sign differently than it will a mural.
Okay.
And this allows the mural to take up the whole space versus the restrictions that we have for signage where it can't be any more than 30% of your wall. So this allows for an entire wall to be a mural versus going through that signage process. And you may or may not be allowed to do it. And when you are allowed to do it, it's only going to be a small space.
And we have that situation in a variety of different regulatory settings. We have certain square footages of outbuildings that don't require a permit. We have certain heights of fences that don't have to be outside the setback. And so we just monitor things. And if we see something that looks like a violation or we receive a complaint, then we would investigate that. But anytime you have an exemption, just by the very nature of the fact that there's an exemption, they're not going to come check with us and say, is it exempt? We're only going to catch that if it's not exempt and they have not obtained a permit.
Yes, Doug is correct on that. There is not an application process for murals. So we are often asked in advance by Main Street or the Arts Commission or people looking to do that type of project. But if this ordinance is approved, there would not be an application.
So there is no
So
application.
there is no application for murals.
For murals.
So I guess my point is that if we're going to give an exemption, so I assume there's a application fee and, a process for signage. Well, I know there is, but there should at least be some kind of application or process before they put up the mural so that we can say, okay, yeah, all right, you want to do a picture of what the Warrensburg looked like before it was founded, the prairie, right? Or
But we don't look at and decide or do any type of censorship now.
well, I'm not suggesting that we need to be doing censorship. I'm just that we need to before we give someone the ability to do something like that, before we give a certain class special application, there should be some process for us to make sure exempt from the norm. You may not say, okay, this is good art. I mean, there's one in particular in town that I'm not a particular fan of, but I wouldn't have told them no. But you can coach your marketing so that it looks like art. And I would argue that good marketing does look like art.
Ultimately, it's at the discretion of the council. If you want to require a permit for murals or an application, you can. This is an effort by staff. There's been a lot of discussion, a lot of interest in more murals in the community, especially on private owned property. And this is our effort to try and get out of the way, to decrease the bureaucracy.
And that was the question I was gonna ask. So if I own a building right now, right there, and I said, I want to paint a mural on the side of my own building.
We would consider that a sign. We would require you to apply for it. And it can't be any more than 30% of the square footage of that building, even though it's on your private property. If you approve the ordinance that's before you tonight, it would be considered a mural. It would be an exemption to the sign ordinance. And you could proceed and put that up on your private property, and you could do the entire wall.
So I would be more comfortable with saying, okay, everyone can use 100% of the wall than I would be with saying, whatever you feel is art is exempt from this limitation. I mean, it's their property. If they want to put something up, whether it's a mural or Coca-Cola sign, I think they should have that prerogative. I think that's their right. It's their property to do it.
The challenge is when you get into signage, there's multiple forms of signage. Not all of it's just paint on a wall. Some of it's lit. So if you allow someone to come in and make their whole entire wall a lit billboard, you have to deal with how that light impacts neighboring property owners, how that affects traffic, how that affects
Couldn't you do the same?
the
thing
aesthetics of your community.
Couldn't you do the same thing with a mural? You could light up a mural. Isn't the one down here lit at night?
It's a different style of light that it's like, yes, the mural can be lit. I'm talking about the signage that has light behind it that shines outward.
Yeah, you're talking about an internally illuminated sign, neon or
And that's the challenge. When you get
LED.
into signage, there's multiple different ways of doing signage.
Well, what I'm saying is, if you're talking about paint on a wall, you can. But why not be able to do 100% of a mural and 100% of the paint on a wall sign?
You could draft an ordinance that does that. It would take a significant amendment to your sign ordinance because right now you do not distinguish in types of wall signs, whether they're painted, cabinets, channel letters, doesn't matter. So you would need to outline a sign ordinance that distinguishes the type of sign that is a wall sign and get into design guidelines. We don't currently do that. If it's the direction of council, we can draft that and bring it back for consideration.
Pass this now as a first step, and if you want to go further, I'm happy to sit on a committee or whatever with you, and we can kind of dive in and talk about the commercial space. And we could just look at paint or whatever else. We could figure that out. So this is going to be ours, downtown in our community, or in our community, but preferably downtown. We're trying to make it easy.
Right, but I think if we're being responsible, we need to think about, as far as I know, there's not a major impetus to have this passed ASAP.
Oh, I would disagree.
There's several areas that we'd like to get done.
People are actively wanting to do this, so we're promoting more. So
Just because someone wants to do something now doesn't mean that it's an emergency.
I didn't say it was an emergency, you said an emergency, so I'm with Casey on it. I'm gonna vote to pass this tonight.
So I'm gonna say, this is a,
So
so-
things are right now.
all right, so right this second, this is a public hearing. When we get down to first ordinance, then I think you can vote. All right, so closing that public hearing and moving on to public hearing on an ordinance amending section 27-504C2 of the Code of the City Ordinance of the City of Warrensburg, Missouri regarding signs requiring permits.
Mr. Mayor and City Council, this is an ordinance also dealing with the sign ordinance, this time with section 27-504C, which is the section of our sign ordinance that does require permits for signs, specifically signs in residential districts. Earlier this year, we had a request inquiry about updating or replacing a sign at the mobile home park on West Young Street with new ownership. And at that time discovered that our ordinance as written does not allow signs in our residential mobile home districts. We believe that was an oversight when it was originally drafted in 2001 and should be allowed in those districts the same as it is allowed in R3 and R4 districts in our multifamily residence districts. So this ordinance would allow them to be in those two, in the residential mobile home district in the same way that they are allowed in the R3 and R4 districts. Again, the entire section 2 is in your ordinance so that you can have that for context. It can be codified correctly, but the only new language is the addition of the district in the introductory sentence. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So this just gives them the ability to have a subdivision sign.
They could have either a ground mounted sign for the complex or a wall sign. Yes.
Do we have anybody who wishes to speak on that? Nobody signed up on that yet. All right, we will close that public hearing. We will move on to first reading only ordinances. So the first reading on ordinance amending section 27-504C2 of the Code of the City Ordinance of the City of Warrensburg, Missouri regarding signs requiring permits.
So this is the one we just.
This is the
This is the one for your mobile home parks.
All right. Conversation on this one?
Is the clerk need to read the title? Is already been read?
I'm already ready.
Okay.
All right. 8.2 is the first reading on ordinance approving an agreement with Tyler Technologies. The ordinance authorizes the city manager and city clerk to execute a software as a service agreement with Tyler Technologies, Inc. That's Barbara again.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, the staff began the process in 2007 of migrating from Encode software to the Intergov software for our building permits and nuisance code complaints. That was brought about by a need to upgrade to Encode 10, and so all the projects, software that influences Encode 10 had to upgrade. When we did that, we continued to host all of the databases and the software on the city's infrastructure on our internal servers. At this point, we've been using the software for a couple of years and are ready to do some regular updates to it that are issued each year by the software company. And in doing so, we'll need to upgrade our servers, our software with our servers. And more of that would come in the next few years as well. So we asked Tyler to give us a quote on what it would cost to do, instead of spending that money to upgrade our servers and invest additional staff time in that, if we were to have them host us on their servers. And they provided a proposal for that. The copy of that cost is in the draft or the agreement that you have in your packet. That would be a cost of $18,600 a year. Currently, we pay a maintenance fee of a little over $12,000 a year to them. So it's about a $6,000 difference. Staff is recommending that we move forward with this arrangement and would recommend approval of the, this is just a first reading, but we would eventually recommend approval of the ordinance and entering into this agreement with Tyler Technologies.
And this is also would improve the public's access to some of this information too, wouldn't it?
I think you're thinking about the GIS project that we talked about in the budget process.
Okay.
And that is a different piece of it, not what we're talking about tonight. I do think that what we're talking about tonight will improve the user's experience. In particular, it is going to allow us to do some automatic intelligent objects, some IOs that will send us alerts as people use the online portal so that applications don't sit there for several hours before we log in and look for them. We would get automatic emails that someone has submitted something or made a payment. So I do think it will improve the user experience as well as staff experience.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion? First reading? All right. All right. 8.3. An amending ordinance 5543, adopting the annual operating budget beginning October 1, 2019 for the city of Warrensburg, Missouri.
Council and Mayor. So this is a amendment to the existing fiscal year budget. As part of year-end processes, we try to put together a more close estimate of where we're at as far as year-end. And this is in anticipation of not needing to amend this budget again as we actually close the books. So in your reports, you have the budget worksheet that shows the very right-hand column of revenue and expenses for each of the funds. The last page of that is defined where you can find all of the funds listed in summary and shows that we are presenting a balanced budget for fiscal year 20. It does include a recommendation for using fund balance for general fund. Part of that was authorized with the refunding of the NID for Hawthorne in December, and the rest of that is funding where revenue is not anticipated to meet expenses. However, I would like to point out at this point, when this report was ran, that general fund is running in the black, if you will, and part of that is because of the CARES Act money. So even though the CARES Act money is included in this budget amendment, it's still projected that once we get all of the September entries completed for expenses, that we will still use some of that fund balance. However, the hope is for that not to happen at all. But if we have everything completed as planned, then that's what is anticipated.
Are we projected to be positive even without the CARES fund, like 30,000?
That was a report a couple of months ago of about $30,000 right now. It looks like it's gonna dip into fund balance by about $100,000, even with the CARES Act money.
I was just going to say, just a reminder that we approved a deficit budget where we're planning on a deficit spend this year of $730-something thousand.
Correct.
So even dipping in 100,000 more expense than revenue, it's still 600,000 less than what we had built the budget on.
What was the big shift to go from positive 30 to negative 100?
Just in operating expenses. There wasn't anything, one particular project that it was showing that. And you're looking at exacts, not, projected, where this is a projected number. So it's still conservative, and it's still anticipated that if we don't spend as much money as we typically do in the month of September, that will come out positive. But right now, with this budget amendment, it shows use of that reserve. The actual use of the reserve won't happen until the actual completion of audit and closing of the fiscal year is presented. As City Manager Stewart mentioned, the $733,000 was what was originally planned to be used when budget was adopted last year. And we have gone through and included the HVA system for the police building and other expenses that were not anticipated that we could get back from the CARES Act money, like unemployment and some of that that's not included as projected receipt of COVID. Does that make sense? So we get more COVID money and CARES Act money related to COVID expenses, but you won't realize those until October because that funding is not to be recognized until it's received or awarded after the first of the year. Questions, comments, details?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now the second reading. Second reading of an ordinance on diversity and inclusion commission residency requirements. An ordinance amending section 1227 composition of Diversity and Inclusion Commission of the Code of Ordinance of the City of Warrensburg, Missouri. What's it?
I would never agree.
All right.
Second. This is for adoption or rejection. Brooks.
Yes.
Holmberg.
Yes.
Lund.
Yes.
Kushner.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes. Second reading on ordinance on energy and sustainability task force residency requirements. Ordinance amending section 2-420 Warrensburg Energy and Sustainability Task Force of the Code of Ordinance of the City of Warrensburg, Missouri.
Move to approve.
This is for adoption or rejection. Brooks.
Yes.
Holmberg.
Yes.
Lund.
Yes.
Kushner.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes. Second reading on ordinance accepting the public improvements associated with the development agreement between the City of Warrensburg and Warrensburg Christian Church, Christian School, including curbs, sidewalks, and stormwater improvements for maintenance by the City of Warrensburg, Missouri.
So the curb and sidewalk and stormwater improvements have all been made per the development agreement dated March 17th. These improvements are ready for acceptance.
Move to approve.
This is for adoption or rejection. Brooks. Holmberg.
Yes.
Lund.
Yes.
Kushner.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes. All right. Ordinance adopting the annual operating budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2020 for the City of Warrensburg, Missouri. Second reading. So I just wanted to, just so the public knows, is that in this budget, there is $100,000 to keep the shelter being operated for until January 1st.
December 31st.
December 31st. So we did manage to do that to alleviate some of that.
It's 100,000 towards keeping the shelter open permanently.
Correct.
So
Right.
we're still negotiating the terms of agreement, but that would fund both operating October 1 through December 31st, and whatever is remaining would be a contribution to the 501c3 that would take over operation January 1 should that agreement be negotiated and agreed to by all parties.
All right.
This is for adoption or rejection. Brooks.
Yes.
Holmberg.
Yes.
Lund.
Yes.
Kushner.
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes. All right. First and second reading.
We were going to just try to avoid doing first and second readings.
There are still some circumstances with timing that sometimes it's still required, but when possible, we are avoiding it as much as we can. The first one has to do with murals, which we talked about in the public hearing earlier. And then others have to do with timing of issues. If it's of the essence, council has the authority to do first and second reading in the same meeting, but when possible, we are trying to transition to readings being on separate meetings.
Mr. Mayor, if I could for a second, we did state, I did ask a couple meetings back if planning and zoning items could move forward at their regular rate. And we could, where possible, go to first and second reading and then start that at the beginning of the new year. This is an item that there is currently a sign permit issued for a mural that they're only painting a portion of it in hopes that this will be approved so they can continue to finish that under these guidelines as opposed to having to stop at the limits of 30%. So we just felt there was a timing issue with this one.
We could pass that ordinance to second reading by title. Oh, you did? Sorry.
I don't think I did.
I was waiting for it.
I would do it for good measure.
So, an ordinance amending chapter 27-503B of the Code of the City Ordinances, of the City of Warrensburg, Missouri, regarding signs not requiring permits.
No, I'm gonna pass that ordinance to second reading by title.
Brooks,
Yes.
Holmberg.
Yeah.
Lund,
Yes.
Kushner,
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes.
This is an ordinance amending section 27-503B of the Code of City Ordinances of the City of Warrensburg, Missouri, regarding signs not requiring permits. This is for adoption or rejection. Brooks,
Yes.
Holmberg.
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Kushner,
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes.
Can I have a moment?
Go ahead.
So to let the council peers and staff and the community know, it's like the murals we're talking about are something that has been in the works for a while. We have public and private community partnerships. So if you go down to the alleyway, Pine Street, Colton, you'll see on the private wall, if you're really going up on the stairs, there's waterfall, et cetera. And then the agency that I do participate with as a director with, Johnson County Highway, got funding to put in some flower beds and some tile murals. And so Main Street's got wrote a grant in partnership with United Way and AARP, so we have some funds. And the goal is to make that particular area extremely attractive to the community. Chief went to a class on art in public and kind of got me interested about how that helps keep pride in the community, et cetera. And so, in my opinion, this is a fabulous project that I'm excited to be participating in as a person, and I think the community will really enjoy what's happening there. So,
Is that the alleyway?
okay, good. So, and Jill Purvis gets a big shout out for taking all the energy and coalescing it and directing it. So, I'm excited to see us move this aspect forward. And then if we want to talk more, I think it'd be cool. But this is going to be an exciting project.
I do want to state for mural projects, particularly the one you're talking about, there's two components of that. There's murals on private property and there's murals on public property, which the city owns.
Yeah.
So the ordinance you approved tonight has to do with private property. The process for murals in public property will include going to the Arts Commission for recommendation of council, and then council will approve at a council meeting. And we're talking probably via resolution at this point. So any murals on public property will go through a process with the Arts Commission and the City Council. The ordinance you've approved tonight has to do with murals on private property. So I just want to make sure that was clear.
No, you're good. You're clear. Because that mural on the stairs went to Arts Commission, but we'll let that process go. But it's complicated to tie the three together, and I'm glad to see us moving forward on something.
All right. 10-2, first and second reading for ordinance accepting easements at 725 Spring Ridge Road. Ordinance accepting storm drainage and utility easement dedication from Thomas E. Patterson and Cheryl A. Patterson in Warrensburg, Missouri.
Sure. Thank you again, council, for letting us bring this to you as a first and second reading. This is time of the essence. We do have property owners who are wanting to build a single family residence at 725 Spring Ridge and just trying to get all the pieces moving. This easement is necessary for the development of 725 Spring Ridge Road and the Stella Ray addition just to the north of that lot. It is required for stormwater improvements and wastewater and water main extensions to serve both developments. One of the single family houses is already under construction, and we expect the other one to be in for permit probably within the month. There are any questions?
Move that said bill be passed to second reading by title.
Brooks,
Yes.
Holmberg, Lund,
Yes.
Kushner,
Yes.
Jacobs. This is an ordinance accepting storm drainage and utility easement dedication from Thomas E. Patterson and Cheryl A. Patterson in Warrensburg, Missouri. This is for adoption or rejection. Brooks,
Yes.
Holmberg,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Kuchar,
Yes.
Baker.
Yes. All right, other businesses. Animal control and animal shelter service discussion.
This is just an opportunity for the council to follow up and have any discussion with regards to these two items. The last meeting, Chief Lockhart did present some options with regards to animal control officer position. Staff would still like some direction from council as far as what you'd like to see as short-term, long-term solutions to that. That mainly being, do we build back into the budget a full-time animal control officer position? Or is that a part-time position? Or do we absorb that into current staff to minimize budgetary impacts? Staff is looking for direction from council, what you want to do. I will say that it is likely if the animal control officer position is put back into the budget as a full-time position, that will probably precipitate an elimination of another full-time position somewhere else in the organization. But that's at the will and the discretion of the council. But staff is looking for direction on that, and any other conversation you want to have with regards to the animal shelter and progress being made and trying to make sure that continues to be a service to our community.
And do you like with the current staff that we have, do you think staff could absorb that job into their, I know they're already going, they're already working pretty hard, so is that something they could even absorb in there?
Could we? Yes. Will that be well received? Probably not. I don't know of any officers or public works staff that's real excited about doing animal control. Regardless, whatever you decide, we will likely cross-train several of those positions. That should we ever have a vacancy in animal control officer, we can meet minimal services of doing that going forward. Just so we have that available, but doing it permanently and all the time, it's going to take time away from other responsibilities that this staff is doing and presents different risks and liabilities to that staff on performing those duties.
Because of other things that are in motion, would it be wise to schedule a part-time visit or budget in a part-time position?
I will say we have some time. So in our current budget, we did budget for our current animal control officer to continue through December because he gave us notification of retirement. So that's already built in the budget. So we already have an animal control officer budgeted at a full-time capacity through basically mid-December. So you do still have time to have this conversation. You just approved the budget. So any changes at this point would be an amendment. But that does buy you some time. But at the end of the day, though, animal control continued to be a need here, given the fact that it needs to be a sworn position, probably underneath the jurisdiction of the police department. There needs to be some arrangement where that position continues in its current capacity. The question is whether the city pays for that or it's part of services provided with future animal shelter that's negotiated.
But the sworn position, probably would be pretty difficult to pick up somebody who wants that job part-time.
I've seen cities that have part-time positions. The question is what level of service will that provide you, right? Even with the full-time, we get calls when the full-time animal control officer isn't on duty. You're going to increase that probability even more with a part-time position.
I think because of other things that are going on, I feel like I'd like to wait to see how other pieces of the puzzle fall into place before we focus on this too much. Like Harold was saying, we can do an amendment later once we know how other agreements are going to be structured. At this point, unless we just want to shoot blindly in the dark, And at this point, I think we have the time, I think a little bit of tactical patience, just wait until we see how other stuff that ends out, other agreements end up being, and then move forward from there. What does the rest of the council do?
I would agree with that. Can proceed with your cross training in the short term, but knowing that we have until December to make final decisions. Proceeding with cross training gives us more options. And we'll discuss it in the coming month or two.
And I'm fine with that. We can do that. The one caveat that I want to make sure you consider though is if we do proceed forward with hiring a full-time officer, it would probably be more benefit to have them trained by the current full-time position versus some cross-trained people. So you do have that consideration as far as turnover and crossover. But even then, you always have the risk anytime that a position resigns or retires or leaves and you're not able to fill that position before that person leaves, you're always going to have that risk anyway. So I just want to make sure that point was made as you discuss and consider.
Are we hoping to have the other pieces locked down well before December? I'm going to hope in one hand and
I think that's the hope of everybody.
pick up a brick in the other and see which one fills up first. But
Maybe revisit at the first opportunity after that's in place.
I'm sorry, revisit.
Revisit the animal control after that contract is in place.
Okay.
Hopefully in the next, maybe next council meeting or worst case 2 council meetings.
Sure, that's fine.
well, 'cause I don't want to put it off. I don't want to put it off.
Yeah.
I mean, until we see how that shapes up, I feel like
Sure.
we'd be making an uninformed decision at this moment.
And I guess I want to make sure too that one of the items that's been discussed is the city will continue to operate the shelter from October 1 through December 31st. And I want to make sure that the council is still committed to that publicly. Even though those agreements aren't in place, that's still yet to be negotiated, et cetera. But I mean, we're running out of time where direction needs to be given to the current staff, or are we going to begin accepting animals at the shelter again, et cetera. That's only a few weeks away. So the sooner we have clarity on that commitment.
I think we're pretty clear on that one, aren't we?
We just passed $100,000.
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear.
That buys us well through the end of the year, and I think we could pass along to the community and staff that the shelter is open for business.
I know we haven't, we've had conversations, but nothing publicly like we've had over the last several weeks. So I wanted to give the opportunity for that to be communicated.
I think the goal this whole time has been to continue shelter operations. We've just been doing a lot of discussion behind the scenes. And so I think it perpetuating is of utmost importance to all of us.
I do want to be clear that no discussion behind the scenes has violated any open meeting laws. There's been no quorum of the council having a conversation behind closed doors.
It makes it a hassle, but yes, we have abided by that.
Back on I appreciate the time. I guess my input for council to think about and staff on is part of the reason why we're having the tougher budget conversations is, you and chief are gonna work on police force staff. And so according to your report, we're down 11 officers. Part of it's cultural and today, and part of it is pay structure. So, not putting extra duty on them. And how you work that out, I realize it's difficult, but
Sure.
That's 31% according to the report. So, public safety is in that respect to phone calls and stuff. I think animal control, and it's a specialized skill. I don't know the detail. I just know, like I've talked to Jim is public safety, Dr. Means, other folks, and then not hurting the police force. I don't necessarily have the magic of how you do that,
Sure.
but I would protect them if I could.
Yeah.
Just when you're down 11 people, you're down 11 people.
Right.
I think it's going to be tough not
to at least have to do a part-time position or something of that, so I mean, you know. The question is what the budget was saying, you know, I think we all agree that we're not excited about laying more people off. So, yeah, because that is a very unique, that person has to be able to, one, handle an animal, and two, be able to handle a person. So,
Yes.
and we know sometimes those are not two common people, so. All right. Appearance to the council not listed on the agenda. Nothing there. All right. Mayor appointments. So everybody got that set up. So these are all just reappointments here. Karchik.
Yeah, Mark.
So Mark Karchik to the Board of Adjustments. And then Sharon Hicklin and Andrea Glenn to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Brooks,
Yes.
Holmberg.
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Kushner,
Yes.
Jacobs.
Yes.
Thanks.
All right. Miscellaneous matters for the mayor and our city council. Anything, Keith? Yeah. Is there anything to say? What are the manager or city manager report?
As the council and the community are probably aware, the required mask or mandates by Johnson County Community Health Services expired last night. However, as far as the city of Warrensburg is concerned, masks will still be required at meetings. We required in our public facilities, city facilities. We're not going to mandate for local businesses and those types of things, but as far as city-owned facilities, city hall, those types of things, we are leaving the mask ordinance or mask mandate in place and asking that the public continue to wear those masks. I'm sure many of you are aware that we've been on some national lists for cases per capita. And so we do believe that caution is still needed going forward. Management staff and I will be discussing tomorrow in our weekly department head meeting regarding any potential changes with regards to employees. But at this point, I don't anticipate any significant change in those requirements until numbers get better. But we'll discuss that as a management team tomorrow. So other than that, I don't think I have anything beyond what's included in the council report, the city manager memo. But as you did discuss, we are very short-staffed in the police department right now. So if anyone knows of anyone that is interested in getting into the police career field, I'm sure Rich would be more than happy to talk to them. And we have begun also, we had several positions that were frozen as part of our budgetary cuts out of this fiscal year. And I have authorized staff to proceed with advertising those positions and getting them going so that as soon as possible after October 1, we can get those positions filled and operational, because there are no frozen positions in the budget beginning October 1 at this point. So I'll let Marcella give the good news as far as sales tax revenues. I don't want to steal her thunder on that one. So
Oh, you could do that. That's fine.
Yeah, can I ask you a question?
sure.
So on that report and back to the police, Chief says he'll be presenting a plan to create some solutions to the problem. When do you think you'll have something?
Chief and Greg and I met last week to talk about that. There's some things we're working on, some potential solutions. So Chief and I will meet again this week and follow up on some of that conversation. But we are going to become a bit more aggressive there. Well, I don't want to talk a lot about it publicly, but there are some concerns with some of these impacts and some of these potential solutions across the organization. But I think there are some alternatives and some solutions that can help with that. For example, one of those may be we currently do not pay any salary or benefits while an individual is in the police academy. That may be a change that we make in order to be more competitive in getting those students to commit to come to work for our police department. We may authorize paying wages and benefits while they're in class and getting their certifications to be on the police force. Hopefully that'll put us back in being competitive and getting people interested in coming and working for us than some of those other entities that they seem to be going to right now. We will discuss pay structure issues and those types of things. But again, I'm dealing with equity issues across the entire organization when we start doing that, right? So time is of the essence, but at the same time, we want to make sure all employees are treated the same and fairly. So that's what we're trying to balance right now.
So I actually have a question. Am I misremembering? I thought we did a pay and benefit study a few years back, and we really were aggressive about getting everything, competitive with our positions. Well, in retrospect, was there an oversight with the police department in that report, or?
No, so this is why you do those wage and benefit studies every 2 or 3 years. So it was probably about 2-3 years ago that we did that, but a lot of other communities do that same tool. So at that time and point, we pulled those averages, we adjusted our pay. Those communities then go do their own wage and benefit studies. We have now upped the ante, we've upped the average, and they've adjusted their pay wage. And so now when we come back 2 or 3 years later again, they've adjusted their pay ranges from what they were paying 3 years ago. And for us to continue to be competitive, it's an unending cycle of continuing to try and outdo each other.
Like with the sheriff's department, they had that proposition passed.
They had the proposition. So when we did that wage and benefit study 3 years ago, we did that comparison. They're at that lower pay range. Well, today they're not at that because they got Prop P passed. Now they're paying a higher wage, and we're in that gray area where our wage and benefit study information is now old and others have adjusted, and we are now back to behind again.
You think Musterman might want to just give us some of that cash?
I wouldn't count on it. He's a great guy, but I wouldn't count on that.
Are we having the same problems across departments filling positions?
We are. We're having the same struggle in fire. We've lost a few employees in the fire department. We've had the same issue in public works. Those are the 3 main ones that we continue to struggle to refill positions. And in particular with the police department, it's just been a perfect storm between retirements, changes in career, less competitive in salaries. Those types of things has been a perfect combination that. And again, when Chief and I got here 5 years ago, we had the same problem. We had probably 8 or 10 positions that were vacant at that time, and we made efforts. We got them all refilled. That's part of the cyclical nature of this. We catch up, and then we fall behind. We lose people. We catch up. We fall behind, which is why when we went through the wage and benefit study, we did the comparison and trying to be at the 50th percentile. I think at that time I mentioned I would like to get to the 60th percentile. That will get rid of some of that ebb and flow. But right now, we just don't have the financial capacity to make that adjustment at this point. Not for all employees anyway.
Director of Finance reports.
Well, as Harold mentioned, sales tax revenue to come in the 1st of September, which is not in your report, it did come in higher than last year's. And total for the year so far is about 5% more than what we collected last year in total. So that's a good thing. And that may change our numbers that we just talked about in this amendment, which is the reason why I kind of cautioned that a little bit, that once the final numbers are audited and audit entries are completed, that, we want to leave fund balance whole or actually increase fund balance a little bit. even though it was just a little bit in 2019 as well. Every little bit helps and not have to dip down into that at all if we can avoid it. Also, not included in the report is the fact that finance is finishing up the CARES Act applications for both reimbursements for monies for COVID that we've spent so far through August 31st. So we've got reimbursements coming to us as a request from the county CARES Act money, and department directors have put together proposals for planned projects for our pre-approval requests that the county has opened up in this application as well. So both of those applications will be submitted to the county tomorrow for consideration, and the timeline for them to give us some sort of acknowledgement of award is the week of the 9th of October. So we will know how much money we might be getting either to do planned projects and get reimbursements or both. However, that's going to be awarded from the county through the CARES Act applications. Other than that, I think everything's included in your report. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Anything, Daniel?
I have two things real quick. One, Larry Mack McKenzie. I know I put this in my report, but just wanted to acknowledge his 40 years of service with the city of Warrensburg in the Public Works Department. He's retiring tomorrow, so it will be his last day. Want to thank Mac for all of his time and service here and dedication. So, and then finally, Greg has raised his hand. So, can I let Greg talk?
That's the mayor's decision. It's not mine.
Yeah, you go to IT next. Go ahead.
Okay, Greg.
That'd be HR.
Oh, it's HR. I'm sorry.
Greg, are you with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Hey, as far as my report goes, there were some questions there regarding some of the things that we've been doing from a human resources standpoint to market our positions. And I wanted to note in the last advertisements that we did for firefighter, EMT, and part-time firefighter, student resident firefighter, we were a lot more aggressive in terms of the marketing approach that we took by also advertising the good benefits that the city of Warrensburg has and utilizing that to more market, not just the wage range that they start out at, but utilizing an employee only lower end if they took all of the benefits that the city is paying for, what that would add to a salary. And I'm hoping this is something that we can continue, but you'll see in my report where we currently have 13 applications for the position of firefighter EMT full-time. And I know they were interviewing applicants this week. And they are coming with experience from surrounding communities that may also be experiencing struggles from a budgetary standpoint. So I'm really looking forward to that. We also have a full class of the student firefighter resident program, and we also have 8 applications for part-time firefighter, which again, serves as a backup for those. So we're going to start utilizing some of those same concepts in some of our applications for the police department, as well as some of our other departments, and see if that also helps in our recruitment of individuals. So I just wanted to throw that out there for everyone.
I don't want to let the night get by without taking a minute to acknowledge the passing of Nancy Anderson. After our last meeting, we were all saddened to learn of Nancy's passing, and I know that Councilman Cushman and Cindy and I all had the opportunity of working with her, and I can say personally what a great impact she had on me as a young city attorney. I know the same is true for Cindy, and I just want to to publicly recognize her service to the city. Just take a moment to say that.
She's very well, and she pioneered a lot of new things for the city that came along.
She has
She
been
was the
like
one that got the
years.
city manager form of government from the
Yeah.
older style. Yeah, she's very well.
We sent something to the family, so. Harold might have to
All right. I think we agreed to, we're ready to go into closed session.
Correct.
All right, then. So we're done.